We are back. Giants Baseball, past, present, and future. The host is Tim Haller. I'm Ralph Tyko, and we have a very special guest this evening. He is what I call the original Met. He was Casey Stengel's first draft choice in 1961 when he was putting together the New York Mets. And his reasoning was, if you don't have a catcher, there are going to be a lot of pass balls. So I'd like to introduce, on behalf of Tim Haller, I'd like to introduce the illustrious Hobie Landrith. Hobie, very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
We were talking off the air, and you're so forthcoming and really with it, and I'm so happy to have you. And I want to sum up a bit about your career. You are originally a Michigan lad, and the way it was in your mind when you were a kid, you were going to play for the Tigers. And so would you briefly tell us how you got to sign with Cincinnati over the Tigers, and give us a little introduction to your breaking into professional baseball.
You bet I will. Thank you. When I was 15 years old, a Detroit scout approached me on the Detroit Sandlots and asked if I'd like to come to Tiger Stadium and catch batting practice while they got Hank Greenberg, who had recently been discharged from the Army, tried to get him in shape. And I said, absolutely, you bet. So I went down, and for 10 days I caught batting practice while Hank Greenberg hit. And this led to the Tigers asking me if I'd like to catch batting practice for the parent team when they return home from a road trip. And obviously I said, you bet I would. I love to. So I did that, and my first day there, I was behind the bat while the pitchers hit and the extra men hit and the regulars were hitting. And the manager, Steve O'Neill, who was leaning against the batting cage, he looked down and he said, kid, how long have you been back there? And I said, I've been here since the pitchers started hitting. And he said, really? Have you hit yet? And I said, no, sir. And he said, well, get out of there and get a bat. Well, I knew what bat I liked, and I asked the player if I could use it. And he said yes, and I got in and I hit. And that led to me being exposed to a lot of people other than the Detroit players, managers, coaches. A lot of the sports writers hung around there. And when I was 16, I was approached by the Detroit Free Press newspaper, and they invited 16 players from the state of Michigan to try out for the Esquire All-American Boys game in Chicago. And I was one of the participants, and at the end of the practice, they took a vote, and I think a lot of my friends were voting, and they selected me, and that led to many, many, many nice things. And then I went on to Michigan State, and I played amateur ball in Detroit, and the team I was on was a very, very good team. 15 of the 18 players on that team signed a professional contract.
Wow.
But at any rate, I went to Michigan State, and then one day I came home and I said to my dad, I'd like to turn professional. And I had collected business cards from 13 of the 16 major league teams. He called them all and told them to bring their rosters. and meet at our house, and he interviewed all of them. And at the conclusion of those interviews, he called me in and he said, son, if you're going to play pro ball, you're going to sign with Cincinnati. And I said, Cincinnati? I don't want to sign with Cincinnati. I want to play with the Tigers. And he said, well, then go back to school. And he convinced me to sign with Cincinnati, and it turned out to be a great, great decision on his part. And I went to Cincinnati. That team in Detroit I played on won the National Junior Amateur Championship. And at the conclusion of that, a Cincinnati scout asked me to if I could go to Cincinnati and work out with the big team, and I said yes, and I went, worked out, enjoyed it, and at the conclusion of that, they asked me to meet with the president, Warren Giles, the president of the Cincinnati Reds, which I did.
Later the National League president, if I'm not
Yes. And at the conclusion of our discussion, he asked my plans, and I said I was going to go to Michigan State. I had a scholarship. And he said, that's great. But he said, when you decide to sign, make sure you call us because we're very interested in signing you. And I said, yes, sir. And he leaned over and he handed me a new $100 bill. And he said, this will cover any incidental expenses you've had while you're here. And I said, well, sir, I didn't have any expenses. And he said, really? He said, how did you get to the ballpark? And I told him I walked. And he said, you walked? And he smiled and he said, well, you keep that because you might think of something that you spent some money on while you're here, and I want this to take care of it. So with that, I said, thank you, and I went home. So that was my introduction to Cincinnati. But
was there a deciding moment when you came home and told your dad that you want to sign a professional contract? Was there a deciding moment that led up to that in your mind where you had crossed a mental thing where you said, I could be a pro?
No, I wanted to get married.
Okay. And that was, you needed the bucks to do that in those days.
Exactly right.
And in these days, as a matter of fact, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same.
That's true.
And that worked out for you. So all was good. This is a Giant show. Timmy's a Giant at heart. I'm a Met fan at heart, but I was a New York Giant fan, and they left, as you know, in 1957. And in 61, they were creating the Mets, and I had a decision to make. Was I going to be a Met fan or a Giant fan? Turned out to be a Giant. It turned out to be a Met fan, but a Giant apologist and just a Giant at heart, given the fact that that the New York Giants that won in 1962 were their entire managerial staff, coaching staff, made up of my heroes. And when I was growing up, and you were in that organization, and you were also in the Met organization, so that adds an extra thrill to this evening for me, and I wanted to share that with you, Hobie.
Right.
But I mentioned off the air that I do remember Casey Stengel, reason for drafting you the first pick in the expansion draft for the National League in 61 for the 62 team, was that you were a catcher, and that Casey said, and it's well documented, if we don't have a catcher, there's going to be a lot of pass balls. And there were a lot of pass balls, and if I remember in that first year, you didn't spend much time with the Mets. You were traded for the illustrious Marv Throneberry.
Correct.
And I wonder, were you sorry that you left the Mets? Did you want to stick it out? Was there anything in those spring training months that really stick with you? That camaraderie with all these new guys that were not new to it, but how do you feel about that? That was a great question, I hope.
You're absolutely correct. As far as a lot of experienced players being selected by the Mets in that draft that year, and we had Gil Hodges at first, and we had Don Zimmer at third, Richie Ashburn in center field, Frank Thomas in left field, Gus Bell in right field, and Roger Craig was on the club. And I'll never forget the first day of spring training in St. Petersburg, Florida. Casey came out of his office, and he looked like a Norman Rockwell character with his one pant leg up and one down and the hat cocked off to the side. And he came into the group of 40 guys, many of them, as I just mentioned, very experienced major leaguers. And he addressed the squad and started out by saying, I know why you're here. Some of you are on your way up in your career, and some of you have plateaued, and some of you are on the downside of the hill. But he said, with all of you, we're going to put together a good team, and we're going to win. And he went on, and I'll tell you, he was with the Yankees, and I was with the Giants, and, they won consistently, and I thought, well, with those great players, it didn't take much of a manager to win the pennant. Well, my experience with Casey, I said, wow, this guy really knows baseball. Let me explain. He said, before the visiting team, before the opponent that you're going to be playing next comes into town, look at the box scores in the paper and see what players are hot. It might be the 7th or 8th hitter, not necessarily always the 3rd, 4th, or 5th hitter. But observe that in the newspaper and be ready for it when they get here. And he said, also, if any of you guys have an injury, you get to the park early enough so that you're on the field when you're supposed to. You don't take up my time on, the time that you're supposed to be on the field because you're in the training room. You get that done ahead of time. And he said, speaking of the field, and all this time he's getting dressed. He said, follow me. Here's 40 guys following Stengel out of the clubhouse down the left field line, onto the field, into the first base dugout. And he says, when you're in the dugout, this is what you do. You watch batting practice, and you watch infield practice. You see who's got the strong arm. You see who might not be playing real well. You kind of looking for strengths and weaknesses that you can use. And he said, when you leave the dugout, you go to the on-deck circle. Follow me. 40 guys following him to the on-deck circle. He says, when you're in the on-deck circle, what do? You're not waving to someone in the stands. You're thinking, now if this guy gets on, what's the bunt sign? You refresh all of the signals in your mind while you're in the on-deck circle. And then where do you go up to home plate? When you get to home plate, what do? And he explains all the things that you're supposed to do when you get in the batter's box. And he says, and when you get a base hit, you get to first base. Follow me. 40 guys following him down to first base. And he says, when you get to first base, what do? You look at the outfielders. You look to see who's got the strong arms. You look if they're right-handed or left-handed. because if you're on first and it's a right-hander and the ball's hit to his left, when he catches it, he's got to turn all the way around before he makes his throw. And that's the difference in you making it and being out. And when you get to second, follow me. And he took us from second to, when you get to second, nobody out. You don't go to third on a ground ball in front of you. You hold up at second. And you get to third, what do you do? And he explained all the things that you do when you get to third base. And when you get to third, you score, and that's how we're going to win. This took about, maybe 20 minutes. And also during that time, he mentioned to the pitchers, this is something I'll never forget. He mentions to the pitchers, when you got the bases loaded and nobody out, right-hand hitter up, right-hand pitcher, you throw that ball belt high on the inside corner, and it's going to look so good to the hitter, he's going to pop it up to in the third base coaching box. And he says that next batter comes up, you throw it low and away, and he tries to pull it, shortstop, second base, first base, double play, game over.
So
this was really
visualized
simple.
it for you and made those guys think and put themselves in a position of what would happen if. And
right, exactly.
If you got it in your mind first, nothing comes as a surprise to you.
Well, I'll tell you that was a lesson for all of us to pass along to those that were coming up in baseball. I passed all that along to my son, and he used it. And let me just touch on one thing on that last sequence that I mentioned to you. I'm playing at Washington with the Washington Senators, and we're playing the New York Yankees. Claude Osteen is pitching. The bases are loaded. There's nobody out. Gil Hodges is walking out to them. He's the manager. He's walking out to the mound, and I know what's going through his mind. He's wondering if his pitcher, who's now in the ninth inning, is tired, but is he better tired than what I have in the bullpen? We didn't have a lot of real good players. So he gets to the mound, and I looked at him and I said, Gil, this is exactly the position that Casey talked about 2 years ago. Bases loaded, nobody out, ninth inning, left-hand pitcher, Harry Bright's the hitter, and
from Sacramento.
And he looked at Claude. He said, Claude, go get him. Throw him inside, belt high, boom. Harry Bright pops it up in the third base coaching box. Don Zimmer catches it. Moose Gowron comes up, and he throws the ball low and away, and he hits it to shortstop, second base, first base, double play, game over, we win. Well, now Claude Osteen thinks I'm pretty good.
You are good, Hobie. You are good. The first thing that I have, obviously, Hobie, is, I was just too young to recall your playing days and, when you first began to develop a relationship with my dad and your Giant teammates. But, so I know you obviously from just a personal standpoint, but it's because of baseball that was, brought us together, and my dad and your friendship.
Right.
So what I know of you, other than the fact that I know you played baseball, I never watched you play baseball, or at least I don't recall it, was just the relationship or the relationships that you had with your Giant teammates, and in particular, my father and Jimmy Davenport. Can you elaborate a little bit on your friendship with my dad and Jimmy Davenport?
You bet I can. It's a pleasure, and your father was one of my closest friends, as was Jimmy Davenport. And, I know your dad's background in college and when he came into the Giant organization and followed right up until the time we played together as teammates. And not only was he a very, very, very good baseball player, but he was a real gentleman. And I valued his friendship very, very much. And was so sorry to see him leave us much too early. And I can recall many times at the San Francisco Giant fantasy camp when your father and Jimmy Davenport and I would sit and kind of reminisce about certain things that occurred during our careers and all the stories that we shared with each other, and it was amazing. I know we were in Scottsdale in the Giants clubhouse, and Mike McCormick would join us. The four of us would be talking about something. And every time someone told a story, it reminded one of us of another story. And the first thing we know, they had over 100 campers there. First thing we know, the room surrounded us listening to our stories. And they brought out the best of us, but I'll tell you, it was just, I cherish those days that your dad and Jimmy Davenport and Mike McCormick and I would chat with each other, and your mother and the wives of the others that I just mentioned, they were all very good friends and really enjoyed each other's company. And Davy, of course, had an illustrious career with the Giants in many capacities. Well, as a player, he was a great third baseman. And again, one of my closest friends, and we did a lot of things together and shared our experiences. And he was my roommate when I was with the Giants, and roommates get to know each other quite well. And I recall one thing, Timmy, that with your dad and I used to go hunting together often. We'd go pheasant hunting in the Central Valley of California.
I recall those days.
I recall one time that you and my son David, who's your age, we were in the field hunting, and it was your first hunting experience, and you got your first pheasant hunting with me and my boy.
Those are the things I will never forget. Hobie, I'm in a peculiar situation, being the son of my dad, who obviously was just a great guy, and all of his dear friends, you and Gabby and a lot of his teammates, of course, being the son of Tom Haller and growing up in that atmosphere, I recall more so than anything, not the playing, but the absolute love between players, you guys, the deep friendships that you developed. And those are the memories that I have, i.e. the hunting trip with the hunting trips that we took together at the off season, and the wonderful times that I had with your son David, and I really looked up to him as well because he was aspiring to play baseball as well, and we know firsthand what those struggles entail. Your desires, wishes, your hopes, your dreams of one day making it to the major leagues. But the things that stick with me most are just these really incredibly wonderful relationships. Because even to this day, when I see you, I light up. I mean, and it's an unfortunate thing that we don't get to see each other very often. And when we do, the last time we saw each other, we were paying homage to Jimmy Davenport.
Exactly.
But still, the depth of which our relationship, it's just so special to have grown up in that time when guys played baseball. That's how they made their living. But there was this element of family and the intrinsic, that depth of things is what remains with me today. And I think it really, those are the things that I'm grateful for because, to me, the Landrith family is family. They're family to the house.
Thank you.
And what a blessing it was for myself, and I know my mother and my brother Tommy as well, to be around an atmosphere like that taught us just the values and the morals and the ways to conduct ourselves properly. And I know I went on a little stint there for a little bit early in my life that was in the wrong direction, but just to be a part of that is just, it's oftentimes overwhelming for me. But I recall those times when I'd pop into town for a day or two and you guys were out there at fantasy camp or wherever it might have been in the clubhouse at Candlestick Park. And you guys are around each other and just talking about those good old days and the lessons that you would teach the younger fellows just by being there and sharing your experiences and what you guys experienced growing or, as young ball players. So that's a special thing for me.
Well, a lot of our conversations were about our families.
They were, and the kids and the wives.
Yes, and you're part of the family. So
that's nice.
I appreciate what you said, but those were very, very special times in many, many ways.
Hobie, you and Tim's dad, Tom, were, of course, teammates. But there's also, because you were catchers, there's something known as the catching fraternity. And
yes.
I'd like to know, I mean, that's a very vague statement, but what that means to you and why it is that I have never heard of competition with your dad, Tim. It was with Dietz, and but there was never any resentment. You guys were competitors, yet catchers are always teammates first and then competitors second. Is that true? Do you find that catching fraternity thing to be accurate?
I think it takes a special individual to be a catcher to begin with. Special in the sense that you recognize when you put the shin guard, chest protector, and mask on that they're referred to as the tools of ignorance when actually they're really the tools of probably the smartest player out on the field.
Nope.
And you guide the pitchers, you direct the infielders, you kind of set the tone for the environment that the ball club has. And you root for each other. You want to be in there, but when you're not in there, you're rooting for whoever it is. And that was the case, but with Tom and I. He rooted for me, and I rooted for him. He was a much more accomplished catcher, hitter than I was, and I respected that. But what I respected the most about Tom and other catchers was their ability to communicate with their teammates, and Tom was real good at that. But being a catcher entails so much. I watch the Giants games constantly, and I watch Buster Posey. He gets nicked on the shoulder, on the wrist, on the toe. Foul tips into the mask that make you see stars. And I feel for him as I did other catchers, when these things happen. And a lot of people don't realize that catching anywhere from, 150 balls a night, your hand, gets swelled up from the constant pounding. And you can't grip the bat as well as the other players grip the bat. It's a fraternity. Even when I meet someone today that told me that they were a catcher in high school, I immediately say, well, hello there. You're a member of the fraternity. And I really respect them, regardless of the level that I played. But it's something special. It's something that I didn't necessarily pick when I was, I had 8 brothers or 7 brothers, and 6 of them were catchers, and the only equipment around the house was the catching gear, and I obviously put it on and started catching. But I learned to love it. I really did, and I just feel blessed that I had enough talent to reach the goal that every little leaguer that ever played baseball would like to attain.
I would like to ask you this. It just occurred to me. Did you get a chance to meet Charlie Fox in your Giants days?
Yes, I did.
Because he is a teenager. You and he share an awful lot in common. He is a teenager, worked out with Mickey Cochran. I think it was Mickey. Who was the Chicago Cub great catcher in the 40s?
Ray Schalk or Gabby Hartnett?
Gabby Hartnett. He worked out with Gabby Hartnett originally.
Wow.
And as a teenager, played in 1943, got up a few times with the Giants, and was a catcher with the Giants in those days.
Yes, I know.
Just as you worked out with Greenberg and what have you as a kid. Just doing that, those early workouts where you can see that I could fit in, how much did that do for your confidence, and how far did that take you?
Oh, it made me, the Tigers made me feel at home, and I, as far as tenseness, being around those major league players, I got over that very early in my life, 15, 16 years old, and it had an enormous effect on my future.
Good that you took advantage of it. We're blessed to have had you this evening. Would you make it the first of many appearances? Because there's so much to ask, and you're so forthcoming, and we're so appreciative. I hope you'll come back, and I hope you enjoyed this.
Well, I did, and I thank you very much. And Timmy, it was a pleasure dealing with you, and I wish you the very best, and I wish your radio program much success.
I really appreciate it, Hobie. Hobie, I have an incommunicable love for you and your family, and I'm so grateful that you are in my life, and you've been in my life for so many years. So thank you for being our guest tonight.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, and I'm just going to end the show by telling everybody out there to keep on keeping on. It's very important that you do. Take care, and see you next time around.
Thank you very much.